Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us live here once again on the African Reform Movement channel, where we discuss everything to do with African reform with an emphasis on Ghana. As always, it's me, you know who I am, and we have the distinguished Dr. Nee and Udaka here with us as well. If you are joining us for the first time, thank you for stopping by and welcome. We love to have you, and please do feel free to make yourself known in the chat box so we can greet you. If you're here for this first time, just to let you know, Dr. Nee has a number of platforms. As I always say, all of this information is in the description box. Don't worry if you can't get it all down now. All is in the description box. It's in the description box of every single broadcast that we've done. So don't worry if you can't take it all down now. Just want to draw your attention particularly to his website, sankofaafrica.com. And that's where he goes, he has more articles, more written articles, goes more in depth onto certain subjects. And he's posted other news articles as well that he thinks would be of interest to you. Okay. He's also got his book Nook store, which I encourage everybody to check out. When you read his book, you can get an understanding of why Dr. Nee thinks the way he thinks. Sometimes in our conversations, I might disagree with something, but when I find out why he has said it, it now makes sense. So for those of you who are, for whom Dr. Nee's way of thinking is very new, it might seem a bit scary, a bit intimidating, read the books and you'll begin to understand his mind, and you'll see it's actually just basically common sense. There's nothing to be intimidated about at all. So capture his books, The Fifth Republic, what's the name of your books again, Dr. Nee? Keeps on going out of my head. Name your books, some of your books on your store.
Fifth Republic, First State Charter, or the other one, Wipno Africa, Afrimocracy, Ghana Muntie, Tedekwashi, History is on the Move.
Okay, so there's a whole plethora of books for you to really get your teeth into, and you'll be able to really start to grasp Dr. Nee's mind and understand where he's coming from. And a lot of his ideas will now start to make sense to you, just like basic common sense. But when it's not been presented in the way he's presenting it, sometimes it can be very easy to completely miss the point. But do stop by the store and do check out the books, okay? So, without much further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Nee just to let you know the topic today is history and future of education in Ghana, which we just discussed before we came online. Is very important. And we were just saying how education opens doors with particular people and why it's such a passion of Dr. Nee's. So Dr. Nee, over to you.
Thank you very much, Uche, and all those who have made time to be with us this morning in Ghana. We are talking about the history and future of education in Ghana. Today, the 23rd of July, 2022 is exactly 22 years since I started working in Australia. Exactly 22 years. 23rd July 2000, the year 2000, I started working as an ICU and aesthetic registrar at Joondalup Health Campus in Perth, Western Australia. I had an interview and I was appointed on the 3rd of July. People complain about migrating to Australia, but by the 14th of July, my visa was ready. My 4-year visa was ready. And by the 20th of July, I left South Africa after 5 years of working and living there. Now, what I want people to understand is that it took 17 days from the point of appointment to departing South Africa. I arrived in Australia on 21st of July, and I started working 23rd of July. And all this is because of one thing. Not because of my height, not because of my looks, not because of my color, not because of anything, because of one thing. And that one thing is called education. Education is a life-transforming commodity. It makes a nobody a somebody. It's a life-transforming commodity. And that is why it is very dear to my heart. Those of you who know, or well, I mean, some of you know that I always say that when I become president, I'll also be minister for education, youth employment, and sports. The portfolio I call the EYES, EYES. I will be the minister responsible for education, youth employment, and sports, because I'm talking to you from Australia here because of education. Of course, in my case, and I believe also inspiration, education and inspiration. All right. But I'm talking to you because I could read and write. Now, as we go through this discussion, you appreciate why this is so important. And I'm very grateful for all those who have made it possible for me to be where I am today. And you see them as we go through this discussion. Can we please have the first slide? History and future of education in Ghana. I'm looking at 7 different eras: the mercantile era, the missionary era, the colonial era, Nkrumah's era, Acheampong, Rawlings, and the Fourth Republic, and then the Fifth Republic. That will be my era. All right, next slide. The mercantile era. That was 1529 to 1850. All right. Let me actually, for us to fully understand what I'm going to talk about, let me explain something first. I know a lot of us, many of us have been miseducated. There was no state in a country called Ghana today until July 1874, when we became a colonial state. We became a colony of the crown. There was no state then. Now, when you come to Accra, or the city of Accra, was divided into 3 parts. We have Dutch Accra, made up of 4 areas: Abola, Asire, Gbese, and Otublon. That's in the center of Accra. To its west, we have British Accra, made up of English Alata, Sempe, and Akongbagia, the 3 other areas. And then to the east, we have Danish Accra, which is Osu. So these 3 parts form Accra. Now, I'm saying this because some people keep saying that, the white people didn't develop Ghana, they didn't do this, or they didn't. Let me say it again. There was no government until 1874. There was no government that collected taxes for development of any part. These were trading companies holed up in their forts and castles. There was no government. Okay. Now, the mercantile era started with the Portuguese in Elmina Castle. And what they did there was teaching the mulattoes, the children they had with the African women. They were teaching them in the castle. And then when the Portuguese left, the Dutch took over around 1637. And they continued with that practice. The British also occupied the Cape Coast Castle. And they also had the same kind of schooling for the mulattoes largely, and a few locals, important locals. And of course, in the Osu Castle, we had the Danes there, and they also did the same. One day I'll tell you my link to the Danish government, because you know I have a tiny Danish blood in me. My father's mother, you know, when you trace maybe 4 generations or 5 generations, the great grandmother was a daughter of a Danish guy who worked at the castle, and her name was Juliana Bryant. Okay, but she's called Dedebo, now Dedebo, and that's the nickname I gave to my daughter. But anyway, that's for another day. Now, this mercantile area, so these were merchants who were doing their businesses through the castles and the forts, and they taught their mulatto children. That was the time they started introducing some kind of formal education into our system, and that lasted for over 400 years, and over 300 years. Now, so these were the 3 main areas of education in those days. They were mainly for mulatto children. Next slide, please. Then the missionary era came. Basel and Wesleyan missions. The Basel mission from Switzerland came to Osu in February 1928. 7 years after, on the 1st of January 1835, the Wesleyan mission landed in Cape Coast. Now, the arrival of these 2 missions changed education in Ghana. Education in Ghana that we talk about was actually laid down by these 2 missions, especially the Basel mission. The Basel mission landed in the Sioux Christianburg at the invitation of the Danish governor in the castle. Those of you who know my house, our house, is just about 200 meters from this castle I'm talking about. And that's where the Basel mission started. Amazing people. 3 of them came. Andrews Rees, 28-year-old guy. Then there was another guy, I think Philip Jagger, 24 years old, and a doctor, Frederick Hines. Unfortunately, Jagger and Hines died, I think within 3 months or so. It was left with only Andrews Rees. So those of you who went to Presec or who are in Presec and you see Rees' house, Rees was one of the first 3 Basel missionaries to come to Ghana. When the Basel missionaries came in 1828, by 1832, they've started a primary school in Osu. That primary school is now called Osu Presbyterian Boys Primary School, and popularly called Boys School. That was the first primary school, formal primary school in the whole of the Gold Coast. And that was the primary school I attended from 1972 to 1978. By 1843, they've opened a boarding school for adolescent boys called Osu Salem. The first school for adolescent boys in the whole of Ghana. And that was the middle school I went to. I was there for 1 year, 78 to 74, I went to secondary school. So talking about education in Ghana is not just what I've read from books, but it's part of my life. The Basel missionaries made it possible for me to sit in Australia today. And I'm very grateful. Now, I have to go back. When they came, there was no state. There was no state called Ghana or Gold Coast. Gold Coast was a trade name of our country. There was no central state. They dealt with the chiefs directly. There was no state. Okay. But they came. They didn't collect any tithes. There was no tax. There was no cocoa. There was nothing. But they built the schools for us. They built the schools for us. Because they believed in the gospel. They believed that it is their duty to bring light to people who sit in darkness. And they died. From 1828 to 1840, 8 of the missionaries died, and they have not converted, and they did not have one single convert. Rees moved from Osu to the mountains, Acheampong. And I think in November 1837, his wife and 2 others joined him there. Within 1 month, one of the 2 died, and within 3 months, the second person died. It was left with only himself and the wife. After 12 years, with no single convert, they were convinced that the African was not ready for the gospel. So they were going to leave. But just when they were going to leave, the Omanhini, the chief of Acheampong, Nana Adudankwa, said something that changed the history of Ghana. He said, when God created the world, he gave a book to the white man and a bosom, that is fetish, to the black man. But if these white people are able to produce a black man, an African, who can read the white man's book, he will follow them. When Rees heard this, they quickly arranged that they've got these African missionaries or black missionaries in West Indies, Jamaica in particular. So they will go there and try and get them to come to Ghana, to come and show Nana Adudankwa that a black man can also read. So they went there, 5 of them went to Jamaica, and they got 25 missionaries, black missionaries, to come to Ghana. They arrived in Osu in April 1843. After staying in Osu for a little bit, they moved to the mountains to start their missionary work. And the mission or the work or the relaunch of the Basel mission started. Amazing people. And the whole of Acheampong converted. So as we speak, the national religion of Acheampong is Presbyterian. But people died. White people left their comfort in Europe to come to our land, to bring light to our people, and most of them died. A doctor, Frederick Hines, was one of the first 3, and he died within months from malaria. In 6 years' time, it will be 200 years since these people came to our shores. And malaria is still killing us, as it used to kill 200 years ago. As we speak today, 32 Ghanaians, mainly children, die every single day from malaria. We haven't fixed malaria. After 200 years, it's still killing us. It's not a priority. It's not a national emergency. And there was that thing. that Chinese virus, what do you call it? COVID. COVID came, that is killing few 90-year-olds and 80-year-olds. Because somebody told there is pandemic, it's not, it's emergency, then everything shut down. But 32 Ghanaians die every day from malaria. And nobody cares. And we are independent. 65 years independent. What is there to celebrate? We haven't even been able to fix malaria. 94% of all deaths of malaria in the world come from Africa. What it means is that almost every country has eradicated malaria. 93% of all malaria cases come from Africa. 95% of all malaria deaths come from, only 7% of malaria cases live outside Africa. And where is that useless? What do you call them? The AU. What are they doing? They have no clue. And Ghana, since independence, which single government has made malaria eradication its number one priority? None. But look at what they did with this COVID. They are talking of COVID affecting our economy. Nonsense. 32 Ghanaians die every single day from malaria. How many die from COVID every day? We are not serious, are we? We are not serious. So, the missionaries came. Within 4 years, they started a primary school. Within 15 years or so, they started a middle school. Also Presu Boys Primary, also Presu Middle Boarding, also Sale. Now, when they came, by 1850, Reverend Johannes Zimmerman has transcribed our language, my language, Ga. And he didn't only do that, but he translated the whole Bible into Ga. He learned our language and transcribed it and translate the Bible into Ga. It took us 130 years to transcribe Dangbe. Uche, Dangbe is a sister language of Ga, very similar. The white man came in less than 20 years or thereabout. It's reduced Ga into a written language. It took the Ga Dangbe 130 years to reduce Dangbe into a written language. They did it for us. Most people don't know this, what I'm going to say. But in 1948, they opened 2 seminaries, one in Osu and one in Acheampong. And then in 1956, they merged the 2 because of staffing issues. They merged the 2 to become a President Training College in Nkrumah. They did it for us. No tithes, no tax, no cocoa. As a matter of fact, when they started a primary school in Osu, the great Tete Kwashi went to that primary school. After a while, he said, no, school was not for him. So his first contact with the Presbyterians or the Basel missionaries was at the primary school in Osu. Later, when they opened the blacksmith training school in Acheampong, he went there to be trained as a blacksmith. The greatest of all, Tete Kwashi, was trained by the Basel missionaries. He went to Fernando Po and he brought cocoa to Ghana to make our country a viable country. People get up and they just insult. Christianity brought light to us. Christianity did not bring colonization. When the Basel missionaries came, there was no colonial state. There was no state. They came 1828 and Ghana or Gold Coast became a colony in 1874. They were there training our people, educating us, bringing light to us before Britain colonized us. And there are 3 stations they work from were Osu, Acheampong, and Abokobi. Abokobi actually literally is a Presbyterian town. And Cape Coast was a working base for the Methodists, the Wesleyans. Well, I'm going to say most of you don't know. But there was this gentleman, Reverend Johann Auer, A-U-E-R. He was a scholar, a reverend minister, and a philosopher. He, in 1857, wrote the whole syllabus for the Basel missionaries, and he created the middle school system that we came to meet. The middle school system that Rawlings changed in 1987 was started by Reverend R in 1857 because he realized that when children finish the primary school and like standard 3, primary 6, and they move them straight into higher learning like secondary school, or what they called at that point in time, it was the seminary, they were not coping. So he drew a plan for a middle school that became standard for education in Ghana until 1987. It took us 130 years to reform the education started by the Basel missionaries. It wasn't colonial education. It wasn't started by the British. We have been miseducated. It was started by the Basel missionaries because our children were too young to go straight from primary school to the seminary. And not only that, in 1883, Reverend Johann Christola, the man who reduced Twi into a written language, started a Christian Messenger, the first Christian newspaper in West Africa, if not the whole of Africa. That's what the Basel missionaries did. By 1892, they have one training college, 3 grammar schools, 7 boarding schools, and 98 day schools. No tithes, no tax. Because they were determined to preach the gospel to the black man. They were supported from their home country to educate us. And I'm sitting here today because of them. I'm very grateful. Those of you who have been fooled to say, oh, Christianity and colonization. No. Christianity has nothing to do with colonization. Christianity has everything to do with bringing light to you, to your land. If after all the education, we cannot even eradicate malaria, then you can imagine what it would be like if you are not be educated. Look at what you are doing. Look at what you are doing. Look at what you are doing. Over there in Ghana. Look at what you are doing. If with all the education, this is what we can do, then you can imagine what the place would be like without the education. The Wesleyans went to Cape Coast. The first, the leader was Reverend Joseph Dunwell. Unfortunately, he died within 6 months. And then he was replaced by Reverend Mr. and Mrs. Wrigley. He went to Cape Coast 1st of January 1835. It was Mrs. Wrigley who started Wesley Girls' School, which is now Wegehe. the number one girls' school, secondary school in Ghana. They did it. Not the British, not the colonial government, not anybody. The missionaries did it. And then they also built Infansepim in 1876. We didn't do it. They came and did it for us. Can we be grateful for once? Think about what you are doing for education. Just look at what we are doing. These people did it without any tithes or any tax. Even at that time, we didn't even have cocoa. Then Okashi came back with cocoa in 1876. We exported cocoa for the first time in 1893, only 2 bags. At that time, the Basel missionaries have over 8 schools across Ghana or the Gold Coast. Nothing. Their own toil. This guy wrote a book, History of the Methodist Church in Ghana. What's his name? Joseph Edusa Eisen. And he said the foundation of Methodism in Ghana was laid by the sweat and blood of white missionaries. May their souls rest in peace. Next slide. Colonial era. So this is when Ghana became, or the Gold Coast became, a colony of the crown. And by that I mean the part of Ghana south of the Pra River, Ashanti and the Northern Territories only joined the Gold Coast in 1902. Okay, we should just get this point clear. 1874, the colonial era. Well, when Ghana became, or when the Gold Coast colony became a colony, the missions have built their schools already, but they have different standards. You know, the Methodists was going this way, the Presbyterians were going this way, and all over the place. So there were some education ordinances by the British colonial government to try and regulate and, you know, make it more uniform. The courses and what we're doing in the various schools. And then they decided that, look, these missions have done a great job. The colonial government itself did not build any school, but then they started to assist the schools built by the missions, paying some of the salaries of teachers. You know, they have some criteria to help them, and the missions were also expanding because they were getting some assistance from government. So this is where government-assisted schools came from. But the first direct involvement of the colonial government in education came in 1918 under Sir Hugh Clifford. Now, he brought a plan, or let's say a policy. And the policy was, 1, every African child should have primary school education. Every single boy and girl should have primary education. Then every province should have 1 training college. And then better salaries for teachers. And then they are able to establish a royal college. These were the things he put up as the colonial government plan for education, on top of what the missions were doing. He said every African child, boy or girl, should have at least primary education. So that was the focus. Now, people will have to understand this. when we say the colonial government did not do this, don't do that, how are they going to do it? A colonial government is not a sovereign government to go and borrow money. They could only work with what we had. Okay. For those who do not understand, at the time Godisberg became governor of Ghana, we were producing only 10,000 tons of cocoa. There was no money to do anything. Okay. If you do not understand, Ghana became a state, or the gold became a state in 1874. At that time, what were they doing? No tax. It was just trade here and there. We just be miseducated. A colonial government, we don't understand how a colonial economy works. A colonial economy cannot borrow money. It's not a sovereign country to borrow money. So whatever money they had was what they used. Okay? Now, there's this commentary that, the colonial government neglected the North. No. The colonial government did not neglect the North. The only secondary school the colonial government built in Ghana, in Accra, was Acheampong School, and that was open to everybody. It was meant for the Ghana people. It didn't build any school anywhere. The schools you see in Accra were either built by the missions or by individuals. So there was no neglect. For them to build, they needed to have the money. And the money came during the time of Godisberg, because he realized that to develop Ghana means that we must generate the money. By 1932, from 10,000 metric tons of cocoa a year, Ghana was exporting 256,000 metric tons of cocoa. Ghana had become world number one. And it was that money Godisberg used to build Acheampong, to build GSTS, to build Kolebu, to build Children's Hospital, to build Makola, to build Adbaka Market, to build Osu Market, to build Osu Maternity Home, to make over 4,000 road, to extend a railway from Accra to Tafo to Kumasi, to build the Takoradi Harbour. You got to create before you share. Godisberg made cocoa the cash crop to save Ghana. He built Kolebu for us. Without the money, he couldn't do anything. People don't understand. He built Acheampong. Well, and then we have this Accra Technical School, which he upgraded to become a government technical school, and then it was moved from Accra to Takoradi to become GSTS, Ghana Secondary Technical School, GSTS. I suspect it was moved there because of the harbor which he built there. That was Godisberg. Say God in Godisberg. He built the modern Ghana. He laid the foundation for the modern Ghana. He took Ghana from a small producer of cocoa to world number one. Since it's 5 years of independence, have we created any cash crop? The even low-hanging one, share butter in the north. What have we done with it? They have a share butter marketing board. What have we done? Instead of creating our own cash crop for the north, like Godisberg did for the rainforest area, we have gone to begging and borrowing. How do you build an economy on borrowing and begging? And then we get up and we insult people, imperialists, colonialists, this and that and that. What have we done? They did not incur any debt for because they didn't have the capacity to go and borrow money. But they left 200 million pounds for us. At that time, it was 4.8 billion for 5 million people. Anyway, the Royal College, the number 4 point of Sir Hugh Clifford agenda was Acheampong College, Prince of Wales College, which Georgesburg built. 65 years of independence, we still have children in Ghana who do not have primary education. Over 100 years ago, Sir Hugh Clifford said every African child should have at least primary education. 65 years after independence, we haven't even met that goal. And yet somebody comes and decides that he's going to use all the money for education for only 3 years of the 12-year pre-university SHS. When there are thousands, in tens of thousands of Ghanaian children who do not have primary education. We are not serious, are we? We don't know what you're about. Next slide. Nkrumah era, 1951 to 1966. Before I start, let me just say one thing. UNESCO recommends that for a country to really, UNESCO recommends 6% of GDP to be used for education, minimum 6% of GDP to be used for education, minimum. Fidel Castro, his 50-year reign, he used between 10 to 12%. And within a generation, everybody was educated. He had oversupply of professionals and civil servants. He was exporting doctors, nurses, teachers to countries around the world, including Ghana. He used 10 to 12%. Now, let's get this point very clear. Okay. Nkrumah and the CPP got the education portfolio in 1951. And from 1951 to 1966, the average money spent on education was less than 4% of GDP. Okay, let's get the point very clear. The first time Ghana ever crossed the 6% threshold was 1976 under Acheampong. I'll discuss that later. All right. So, there's too much lies in Ghana. Okay. For the 15 years, the average was less than 4% of GDP. Okay? I didn't conjure that from nowhere. You can decide to check. The thing is this. When Nkrumah came, in all fairness, he had good ideas about education because he himself, he knew that it was education that took him from Nkrumah to Accra to America and to UK. Without education, he would have been nobody. And the education didn't come from fellow Africans. The education came from a Roman Catholic father who went to Nkrumah to evangelize there, and they had the school there. In Nkrumah's autobiography, he didn't mention his own father's name. In fact, he didn't mention anybody in Nkrumah's name except that Reverend Father. That Reverend Father gave him the name Francis. And that Reverend Father gave him his date of birth, 21st September 1909. He himself did not know. He didn't mention his father's name, so we couldn't comment about what the father knew or did not know. But it was the Reverend Minister, the white man, who left Europe to come and evangelize in Africa, in that town, in that village. So he took education serious. He started the experimental school system in 1952. And I think he built the first secondary school in the north. I don't know where it's Tamale. I think Tamale Secondary in 1951 or something like that. He took education serious. But it's one thing having a good aspiration and another thing having a good policy. The difference between aspiration and policy is cost, funding. Okay? Aspiration remains aspiration unless it can be funded and sustainably remain funded. That was the missing link from Nkrumah. He's been to US and he's been to UK. And he had been to US and he had been to UK. And he knew there was no concept like middle school, 4 years of middle school before secondary school. But that was the structure the Basel missionaries bequeathed to us. And in Nkrumah's mind, he had to change. He himself went through that system in Nkrumah. Okay. He completed middle school from 4, and I think went to teacher training or something. So he wanted to change that. So he started the experimental school system in 1952. So that children would go to 6 years primary and from there go to secondary school. But he couldn't do that. From 1952 to 1956, he couldn't nationalize, roll out the whole system to cover the whole country. Why? That the secondary school policy. So the primary school, the plan was to abolish the middle school, have a primary school system that people would go to primary 6 and go to secondary school. But he couldn't do that. The experimental school remained experimental until it was overthrown in 1966. Secondary. This was caused the problem. As a matter of fact, Nkrumah built 34 secondary schools. That they were boarding schools. I think 3 in Accra, right? Accra Girls, then my secondary school in Labone, I think so. And the rest across the country. When he became prime minister, there were 2 types of schools in Accra. Community day school like Accra Academy and Acheampong boarding. Nkrumah had a choice going the Accra Academy way, and then of course we have Accra High or Raleigh, Christian Methodist, all these schools by individuals in Accra. Not by the missions, individuals, but they were day schools. He had a choice of going that way or going Acheampong way, and decided to go Acheampong way. Big, grandiose boarding schools. We were built only 34. Because even if we gave all our budget to education, we could not educate everybody through a boarding school system. Impossible. No country has done that. And that was a fatal error. Because when you look at Labone alone could have built Osu Academy, La Academy, Teshi Academy, Nkrumah Academy, Tema Academy. When you look at Temasco, could have built Tema Academy, Bom Academy, Pampra Academy, Nkrumah Academy, Adan Academy. The electricity bill alone could have done that. But we decided to go big boarding schools. We were supposed to build only 34. So, from 1951 to 1966. In 1951, enrollment in secondary school was 750 there about here. In 1966, it was 10,300 or thereabout. So in 15 years, Nkrumah was able to build or increase secondary school enrollment only by, I think, 9,300 or thereabout. In all fairness, I know, I believe that he thought he could do more, but I couldn't because there was no money. We were spending less than 4% of our GDP on education to start with. And all the money was going to big boarding schools. So we couldn't expand. In 1960s, only 5% of eligible students could go to secondary school. That was a disaster. That was a disaster. Wrong policy. Good aspiration, wrong policy, because the aspiration was not properly costed. It was so bad that by 1963, we had to introduce fees for primary and middle schools because there was no money. But I'm not saying that that's what is written. And immediately, enrollment to primary schools began to decline. And it declined from 65 or 64, 65, 66, right up to 1972. Then, so Nkrumah started well with the experimental school for primary to get rid of the middle school system and make it like it's everywhere in the world. Primary school, class 6, you go to secondary school. But you couldn't roll it out because there was no money. Secondary school, you chose the wrong option of boarding school. In the end, you could build only 34 because it cost money. It costs money to do that. The problem with Ghana is that you can't talk about these things because people think you are saying for whatever reason. And because we cannot talk about these things, that is why we are where we are. That's another Akubado will come back and say free boarding SHS. Because we have not actually spoken about this boarding school problem properly. It was wrong policy. It's not sustainable. All the boarding schools that Nkrumah built, they are not being maintained by all students. How can a monocrop economy that depends on only one crop, cocoa, fund a boarding school system to educate everybody? How is that possible? How is that possible? Not one single country has tried that before. Not one. The completion rate in Victoria was 98.5% last year. That is, those who went to class 1, the 100 people who went to class 1, 98.5 of them finished year 12. And all of them were day students. To educate everybody, it cannot be through a boarding school system. Impossible. We got it wrong. We got to change. Tertiary. Nkrumah built Cape Coast University largely to be training teachers. A good idea. Definitely good idea. And he built Tech, University of Science and Technology. Good idea. Definitely good idea. He made reasonable investments also in the University of Ghana, which was existing before he came. So he did well. But you see, and this is where the problem is. When those who went to these universities talk about their time, the kind of food they used to eat, the things they did for them, and you realize that we just get all the wrong. You cannot spend that amount of money on university education when 60% of those who are supposed to go to class 1 were not in school. These people who went to university at that time were pampered. And that sense of entitlement has been with them to today. Most of them have died. But a lot of money was spent on them. You cannot pay somebody, fish somebody to go and study. Fair enough. They were the first, so they can get something, but it should not be at the expense of primary education. So the idea was good. But in my opinion, the implementation was not so good. Next slide. Acheampong era, 1972 to 1978. Oh my God, I'm running late. 1972 to 1978. I'll say that Acheampong did very well in many ways. But my problem with him is that he also tried to increase access. So he tried to bring in a JSS so that you abolish the common entrance. So that people will move from primary school straight to JSS and then continue from there. Good idea, but as far as I'm concerned, Acheampong should have rolled out the experimental school, because once you roll out the experimental school, the middle school will be gone. And people from the experimental school will go straight to secondary school. My honest opinion was that the effort spent on because nobody starts school from JSS. Everybody starts school from primary school. So the focus should have been primary school. You should have rolled out Nkrumah's experimental school system, and there would have been no need for the JSS, because the experimental school kids will be able to go to secondary school. Anyway, Kutu did well. He expanded the secondary school system. As a matter of fact, when Kutu came to power, enrollment to secondary school was only about 13,000. By the time he was put out of power, enrollment was about 32,000. So in 6 years, Kutu increased enrollment into Form 1 by over 19,000. More than twice what Nkrumah did in 15 years. This is the simple truth. And Kutu did this without any borrowing from outside. Internal mobilization. He was able to do that. We shouldn't forget. And he also, in terms of tertiary education, he also brought medical school to Tech. Within 6 years, Kutu did all this. Next slide. Rawlings era in the Fourth Republic. Educational reforms, 1987. So, Rawlings, under pressure from IMF for structural adjustment, looked into our education system. And they recommended that we should go back to what Acheampong started, the JSS. So, the JSS, the middle school was abolished, and JSS was meant to replace the middle school. The middle school that was started by Reverend Johan Earl in 1857 was abolished in 1987 after 130 years. And it was replaced by JSS and SSS. The whole thing was changed. The idea was good because it increased access. I know families in Osu, for generations, nobody has gone to secondary school because they couldn't pass a common entrance. But the JSS abolished the common entrance, so increased access. From primary school, you go straight to JSS, no examination. The examination occurs after JSS to go to secondary school. Good idea, but like with Acheampong, I think the emphasis, the focus was wrong. The focus should have been primary school. Nobody starts education from JSS. So we have a rotten public system already. And when you start from the middle, you'll be feeding the JSS with very weak students. Very, very weak students. Because the primary school system, the public primary school is weak. As we're speaking now, we have 5 different types of public primary schools. Number 1 is the university primary schools. Number 2 is the primary schools for the military, the army, whatever they call them. Number 3, you have the experimental schools. Number 4, you have the mission schools. And number 5, you have the local authority schools. They all perform differently. And they all funded differently by the same government. That is not right. And that's where the education reform should have focused, to bridge the gap and have a standard primary school system that will benefit all Ghanaians. When I went to class 1 in 1972, more than 99% of us went to public school, and less than 1% went to private schools. When I got to medical school, 90% were from private schools. So the 1% morphed into 90%, and 99% morphed into 10%. So there's something fundamentally wrong with our system. Fundamentally wrong with our system. If 1% could flourish to 90, and 99% will diminish to 10, then there's something fundamentally wrong. And that's what the education, because as you are speaking now, if you go to the medical school, you have the same proportions. So nothing has changed. There has been no reforms. Or the outcome of the reforms have not been as expected. Nothing has changed. When you go to medical school, it will still be from Acheampong, Presec, Wesley Girls, and the rest. Nothing has changed. So there has been no reform, no meaningful reform. Now, then came Nana Akufo-Addo. Instead of looking at where the problem is, he decided to go where the politics will be beneficial. Fund SHS, churn out 18-year-olds who will be voting every year. Because SHS starts from 15 years to 18 years, they end 18 years. So churn them out, then they'll be voting for him because he's going to make it free. At the expense of people, primary school students, learning under trees. We are not correct, are we? I can talk about this forever. But we have a problem. We have a big, big problem. We've forgotten that in 1918, Sir Hugh Clifford said every African child should have at least primary education. In 2022, there are African children in Ghana who do not have primary education. And the flagship policy of a government is free boarding SHS. What happens to primary school, to JHS? Next slide. The free to public. That will be my error. And the education is going to be based on 4 A's: available, accessible, appropriate, and affordable. Available. First of all this will cost money. You see, there are 3 stakeholders in education: the student, the family, and the state. And we have to know the role of the state. We have to know the role of the family. And we have to know the role of the student. Nobody can make anybody who he doesn't want to be. And it is not the role of the state to feed students. The point must be very clear. What am I going to do differently? First, education will be funded 10 to 12% of GDP. I don't know the current rate. If it's 5%, if it's, I don't know, but we're going to cut 1% of foreign service of GDP. We're going to cut 1% from office of the president. You're going to cut 1% from the size of the government machinery, bureaucracy. You're going to cut 1% from what else? We'll cut 5% from other areas to make sure that education gets to at least 10% of GDP. Okay. Now you have 10% of GDP. What are you going to do? Available. Available means that you have spaces for children to go to school. Okay. So, if you do our census, we need to know the number of children who are 6 years, who are supposed to be in class 1. And the state must make sure if there are 1 million, that means there are 1 million desks. It's as simple as that. The state will have to know the number of children who are 12 years. If there are 1 million, then there must be 1 million desks in JSS1. And we have to know the number of children who are 15 years. If there are 1 million, then there will be 1 million desks in SHS1. It's as simple as that. That's why we do census, to plan. So now, let's say we have 10% of GDP for education. And let's say that we are not talking about university, we are talking about pre-university education. So what are we going to do? We are going to get the money to fund. First of all, we are going to take the program of the experimental school and roll it out. The experimental school operates around the same level as probably the armed forces schools, or maybe just under the university primary or whatever. But we are at least going to make sure that the experimental school, every single school operates at the level of it. Whatever it will cost to do that, that will be the money of the 10 or 12% that will go to primary education. Because when we secure that base, JSA, JHS, and SHS will reflect our system properly. Students who will go there will be as good as those who are coming from the private sector. So when you go to the university, you realize that you have the same number of people from the private sector proportionately as from the public sector. It happens in Australia, it can happen in Ghana. So, first of all, we increase funding for education to 10 to 12%, almost double what UNESCO recommends. And the money will be used to upgrade the public primary school system. Because once the foundation is strong, it's a lot easier. 2 is, so we're talking about availability. So you have to have the physical desk for everybody who is of school-going age. You have to make it available. Accessibility. Accessibility can be spatial or transitional. Spatial means that where do you have to site the schools so that those who are supposed to go there will be able to go there without much difficulty. If you remember, location and localization of industries in O-level economics, where you cite industries, there are factors that determine where industries are cited. And the same will go for this one. So you build a school in a place where access to the school, spatial, where the space you put it. Then transitionally is how one person moves from one level to the other. The JHS got rid of common entrance. Now you have BEC. I just do not accept that a Ghanaian child should be examined at the age of 15, whether you should continue school or not. I will not accept that. So we're going to have a system like in Australia, K to 12, kindergarten to 12, or whatever, grade 1 to 12. You go to class 1 and you are going through straight to year 12, which is SHS 3, before you write any exam. At the age of 18, you are mature enough to write external exams, not 15 or 12 for common entrance. No. And nobody should stop a Ghanaian from going to school at the age of 15. That is wrong. We have all these exams because we had a pyramidal system where the base of students is big, but very few spaces at the top. So we have to have examination to eliminate them all the way. That's how ASTE was started. When I went to university in 1970, there were only 8,450 students in the whole of Ghana tertiary institutions, the 3 universities. For a population of almost 14 million, Ghana had the lowest university student per population in the Commonwealth. And we couldn't expand the universities because all the money was going into boarding schools. There was no money left to expand anything. You got to change. So what am I going to do? Accessibility. We're going to stop the BEC exams. As a matter of principle, I believe that the 633 is not appropriate. I think we have to have 642. So that by the time we finish 6-4, it will be 16 years and mature enough to start an apprentice or something like that. And we'll know enough. I think 642 is the way to go. But what you're going to do is that it's going to be continuous. So that the only exam, and that's what my son did, that's what my daughter, that's what happens in Australia. And those in Ghana are not better than those here. You go to school, you go through. You get to year 12, you do exams, you do very well, you continue university, you don't do very well, you go and learn something else or whatever. But that's accessibility. They must have access to complete secondary education. Then appropriate. The appropriateness is very important. The syllabus, the curriculum. This is a whole thing that can take a day. But we need a curriculum that will address our manpower needs and that will fix the holes in our economy and our employment in our labor markets. We all can't go and read history and geography and come out and think there'll be a job for us to do. So we're going to have a very innovative curriculum to move us from the third world to the first world. I'm writing extensively about this in my manifesto. You'll find it in my book, With No Africa. And then finally, affordability. Education must be affordable to the family and to the state. No two ways about that. If it's not affordable, it will not be sustainable. And affordability means that we have to cut our coats according to the size of our material. When we're building boarding schools during Nkrumah's era, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, then the premier of Western Nigeria from 1952 to 1960, before Nigeria became fully independent under limited self-rule, was building community high schools in Western Nigeria. That was when federalism was working in Nigeria. He was building community high schools. So when Nkrumah was able to build or was able to increase from one enrollment by 9,300, Awolowo was able to do that by 100,000. For a population not so dissimilar to that of Ghana in Western Nigeria at that point in time, 52, 1960, you can go and read about it. The Awolowo revolution in health and education in Western Nigeria, when it was premier, was building community high schools. Yes. The difference in implementation brought a different outcome. So when one was creating less than 10,000, another was creating 100,000. Because it all depends on money. You got to go back to the drawing board. The only way we can educate every Ghanaian is through community schools. Education must be seen as a community asset. That the community will own the education of its own people. That's the only way. That's what happens here. The postcodes. Schools are linked to the postcode, to the communities. And I talk about set code some time ago, and how it's going to be used to do all these things. I spoke about it before. Affordability. So you ask me, then what is going to happen to the big secondary schools? Look, my plan for affordability is what I call the aeroplane model. If you have traveled in an aeroplane before, you know what I mean. We have economy and we have business class. We all get to the same destination, but one pays more than the other. If you want to go to boarding school, like I said, there are three stakeholders: the student, the family, and the state. The state is going to provide economy for everybody. And that's the thing. If you want to go to boarding, you want to go to business, then you got to pay. Your parents will have to pay. It is not the responsibility of government to feed people's children in school when other Ghanaians do not even have primary education, or they're having very useless primary education. That's acceptable. So that's the aeroplane model. And not only that, we can have education tourism. Foreign students coming to Australia is the third largest foreign exchange, $47 billion a year. We can turn our big boarding schools into education tourism centers where people, even Ghanaians living outside, can see the quality and can bring their children here, maybe a year or two for them to learn few things. And we have a lot of people in West Africa, when it's really properly set up, they will bring their children to Ghana for proper education in those moments, and they will pay and use the money to subsidize our education. But government cannot pay for people's children's food and the water they use to bath themselves. Meanwhile, other Ghanaians are at home and their parents are struggling to feed them. We can't do that. That's not equity. So now this is what's going to happen. If the government spends $100 on a day student a year, government will spend $100 on a boarding student a year, and the parent will pay the rest. Full cost. It's a choice. But before we do that, we have to make sure we have day schools in all communities. And that we will do. That we will build. The aeroplane model. The government will provide economy for everybody. Those who want to go to business class, they will have to pay for it. It's as simple as that. I know NDC were scared, talk about free, but I'm saying that I will abolish it. No review. It's not sustainable. We have to have community day schools. I actually don't even think it's proper for a 12-year-old or now a 15-year-old to leave the parents to go to, nah. At that age, parent involvement in the education of their children is very important. Being a father, I know now. And I can talk about this forever because we know the differences between what I received and what my children received here. We can talk about this forever. Now, let me say this again. 22 years ago, I started working in Australia, and those who made that possible for me were the Basel missionaries. They built my primary school, they built my middle school, and my secondary school was also built by the Methodist Church. And my sixth form was by the Presbyterian Church. So I went to mission schools too. They made it possible. And I'm very grateful for them. Wherever they are, may their souls rest in peace. May their souls rest in peace. And may God bless their country where they came for to come and sacrifice and do what they did for us. When the African said he's known God, he didn't go to the villages. He went straight to go and start mega churches in America because he wanted money. People of no conscience. His book came and died. We have to have a hall of fame, makers of our civilization, that will have people like Andrew Rees, Christola, Dunwell, Wrigley, Thomas Birch Freeman, Dr. Agri, Philip Kweku, John Mensa Saba, Joe Kisley Hayford, Gordon Gottisbeck, those who brought light to us. Those of you who don't know. After the 1874 Anglo-Ashanti War, and Ashanti lost, and Ashanti was forced to sign the Formina Treaty. The last clause in the treaty was to abolish human sacrifice. We were killing ourselves for stones and rivers and trees and dead kings and chiefs. We were forced to stop it. You say Christianity brought colonization. You are just crazy. How did the Basel missionaries bring colonization to Ghana? How did they do that? Before we were colonized in 1874, they were establishing schools all over to teach people to open your eyes. China is coming. The last time I checked, it's a godless country. They are coming to colonize you again. And they are not Christians. So you got to check yourself. You got to check yourself why one group colonizes other. And this guy put it very nicely. Walter Rodney. He said, when one society is compelled to relinquish power completely, to another society, that in itself is a form of underdevelopment. We were colonized because we were underdeveloped. We are not underdeveloped because we are colonized. No. Our underdevelopment gave rise to our colonization. And as long as we remain underdeveloped, we'll be colonized again. China is coming. Look at what you are doing. Look at what you are doing. Look at Ghana. Look at what you are doing. I just read an article somebody sent to me today. I think the 10 worst managed economies in the world, Ghana is number 9. Yes. Look at what you are doing. We've been lied to think that colonization is a matter of race. No. Rome colonized the whole of Europe for 500 years. Colonization is a matter of power and development. The more powerful person, the more developed person will colonize the less powerful and the less developed. It's as simple as that. We're not colonized because of religion. No. Christianity had nothing to do with colonization. Otherwise, how do we explain the colonization of Mali, Niger, Burkina, Mauritania, which are all Muslim nations? Were they converted into Christianity? No. It's got nothing to do with that. What about India? At that time was 80% Hindu and 20% Muslim. How were they colonized? Nothing to do with religion, but to do with power and development. So let's keep ourselves underdeveloped. Let's keep ourselves weak, and we'll be colonized again.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nee. You covered a lot of ground there. A lot of ground was covered. We are way over time, so I'm just going to shoot straight to the comments and questions. Yeah. So
Okay.
let's just go straight away. Kenneth said, history delivered by the great Osu boy, learning a lot in my adult life. Kenneth. Shika said, an interesting history of education that should inform education policy of the future. Kenneth then said, colonialists still had an agenda to enrich themselves, regardless of some of their good development projects.
But why do you think that somebody will leave his country to come to a country and be poorer? Why would you think that someone will leave his country, come to a country and come and die from malaria and not benefit anything? How can we think it that way? Of course, they came there for business. They definitely came there for business, but they did what our own people are not doing for us. They had an agenda to be rich, yes. Like I have an agenda to be rich here. I'm not here in Australia to be poorer. And my brother Kane is not in London to be poorer. So we must allow them to know, we must know that that's how the world works. And that's what Wataroni said the responsibility of every African to understand how the world works in order to overthrow the system. That's how the world works. We move to be better. They moved to become better. They created the colonies as the external arm of the economies. We have failed to mobilize the diaspora as the external arm of our economy. We have failed to do that. We are fighting the diaspora. But they definitely came there for business. Yes.
Okay. Next statement from Shika. How would I compare the adverse effect of free SHS to Kutu's education policy?
You can't compare. You see, Kutu was a simple guy, and he saw the thing from the simple man's perspective. Kutu was not a politician. He wasn't there to be voted for. So he had the freedom to do things a bit more sensibly. The free SHS is purely political. Children go to SHS at the age of 15, they finish at the age of 18 when they arrive to vote. So if you can catch them there, then you have a way of getting a chunk of that voting block on your side politically. That's all. The mistake of Kutu, as far as I'm concerned, he should have gone back to the experimental school system to roll it out. As far as I'm concerned, any education policy that does not address the public primary school system is bound to fail. The good news is that in 1971, I went to class 1, 99% of us were in public school. The last time I checked, only 78% are in public school. 22% are in private school. So the number that the government has to cater for is now smaller. Okay, as against like time, which was 1978. So government has, and this 78% includes the army schools and the university primaries and experimental schools. So we still have maybe 60 or whatever percent in the public system. And it's a lot easier now to roll out the experimental school system, which produce the great people like Chachugata, Fuichigata, Isaac Quiz, Adesoya, and the rest. They all went to experimental schools. But we couldn't enroll it because there was no money. All the money went to big boarding schools, which were not and are not sustainable.
Yeah. Next question, Shika. If the foundation is damaged with this education system, what can the righteous do?
What foundation? You got to go back. You got to go back there, dig the foundation, build a new one, spread the experimental school system. Like your Uncle Chachu, he went to Accra Newton Experimental School. From there, straight he went to Infansipim and straight to University of Ghana. And he finished at the age of 20 because he went to experimental school. He went to secondary school at the age of 11 or 10. That's what we want. That's what Kutu should have done. But Kutu went to JSS. He went to the next level. And Akwada has even gone further. He's gone to SHS. He's forgotten the first 9 years of education. No. Available. There should be a desk for every eligible pupil or student in Ghana. There should be a desk somewhere. And to do that sustainably.
Do you want to finish your point? Do you want to finish your point before I go on to this question?
Okay. Yeah. So
to do that sustainably, you said.
Yeah, to do that sustainably, it's got to community schools. Okay. The schools are owned by the community.
Okay.
We cannot do the board. Okay.
There are three main types of assessments in school. Emphasize that summative assessment is what you will abolish at the basic level, but not the formative and diagnostic assessments.
These are complicated things for me, Collins. For me, when a child goes to class 1, the state cannot use any means to stop a child finishing SHS. Whatever happens in the school, if a particular child has problem, then it needs more attention to be paid to him or her. But there cannot be a formal examination that can say that at the age of 15, you cannot continue school. No state should be able to do that. All right. So the form of assessment you have could be internal things that you realize, oh, this group of students are struggling. Well, you got to organize things for them to let them catch up. You can repeat a particular student if he's really well behind. But you cannot do an examination to block students from progressing. That access must be left open. Parents can say, school is not for my child. I'm taking my child out of school. Like I said, the completion rate in Victoria, my state of Victoria, was 98.5. It's not 100%. So 1.5% did not complete. But there was no formal examination to say, no, at the age of 15, you cannot continue. I think that's abominable. Because people pick at different ages. I know some people who started doing very well when they got to Form 3, Form 4 in secondary school. You cannot stop them by understanding exams.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. Accessibility.
Okay, this is the final question or statement. In all your submissions, I don't hear about the human resource in education, teachers to be precise. What would be the minimum teacher qualification to handle a basic and secondary schools?
As far as I'm concerned, it should be a degree. For class 1 to year 12. You must be able to design a degree course for primary education and a degree course for secondary education. All right. Now, I didn't go too much into the curriculum because that would take the whole day. And that's why I didn't talk about the human resource. Definitely, it must be a degree.
Okay. Total questions. Yeah. We had one new viewer. I don't know if you recognize his name.
Yeah. Banaini. Hey. He's my protector.
Okay.
Yeah. He's my How do I describe him? Basa is my protector.
Okay.
So yeah, he's an Osu boy.
Okay,
And
cool.
yeah, the funny thing is that his mother's brother, his uncle married my father's sister, my aunt.
Oh,
So we
wow.
are cousins-in-law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, nice
He's
one.
in London anyway. He's
He's
a
in
retired
London?
accountant.
Did you say he's in London?
Yeah, he's in London.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you very much. He's an Nkrumah though.
Okay, well, so you have a lot to talk
And
about. You have some very spicy conversations, I can imagine.
yeah. I'll tell everybody something today. This man's uncle, right? It was called Jinwa Odoe. He was the treasurer of the CPP in Nkrumah's government at some point. And when the Nkrumah government decided they're going to apply the PD, the Prevent Detentive Act, Jinwa Odoe, because my father was in opposition and they're going to arrest them. It was Jinwa Odoe. I'm saying this to the whole world. It was Jinwa Odoe who came to tell my grandmother that they come to arrest your son. So he sneaked from the government. The government told him, they go to arrest your son. So the first of the three people that were arrested, my father was escaped. He went to Lome because my great-grand admired an Olympio. So he escaped and went to Lome in Togo. So I don't play with his family. We never play with their family. And then his uncle married my aunt. So I didn't know more. You know this story already, so now everybody knows. Your uncle saved my father, and by that, I was born. My brother was being in jail to 1966.
Yeah, he just responded here saying, yes, I'm an Nkrumah.
Yes, I know.
Oh dear. Well, thank you for joining us today, Alex. It's nice to see you. And that's going to
He
be
is a Basahini of the Ghana state.
So thank you to everybody who joined today, who wrote questions, who made comments, much appreciated. As always, we'll be back again next week, Saturday, same channel, same time. Please spread the word, let people know about these conversations, let them know about Dr. Nee, let them know about his books and what he's about and what he's trying to accomplish. And let's all get a movement going, okay? So enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, and we'll see you again, same time next week. Bye-bye. Thank you, Dr. Nee.
Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next weekend. And today is my 22nd anniversary in Australia, and I thank God for that. I definitely do. And I thank the Baso missionaries. Basahini, that is Alex Amate. He also went to Susalem.
Okay.
He went to the same school, yes. Okay. They made him who he is. The Baso missionaries.
Okay.
They made us all who we are. Not the colonialists, not Kwame Nkrumah. No, the Baso missionaries. I'm joking.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye, Bye.